I am making a deck profile for my Chaos Ogdoadic deck. I mainly decided to put the deck together just because Ogdoadic is a deck that likes to fill the graveyard with reptile monsters, and the Chaos archetype relies on getting light and dark monsters in the graveyard, which Ogdoadic is. Because Ogdoadic is just a bunch of light and dark snakes. And I figured I'd build the deck. Now that it's built, I figured why not make a video on it. So, starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Core of Chaos. Core of Chaos cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by banishing a dark monster from your hand or graveyard. And then, if this face-up card will leave the field, banish it instead. And it also has the effect that when it is special summoned by its own effect, then you can special summon a... what was it? Shell of Chaos that is banished. And then for the next monsters, I play 3 copies of Nunu, the Ogdoadic Revenant. Nunu has the 2 effects where you can send it from your hand to the graveyard, to then send a dark reptile from your deck to the graveyard. And then if you control no monsters, or the only monsters you control are Ogdoadic monsters, then you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but it is banished when it leaves the field. Then I play 3 copies of Nalia, the Ogdoadic Remnant. Nalia has the same hand effect as Nunu, except you send a light reptile. And then it also has the effect that if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add an Ogdoadic spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which I believe in this build the only option is Ogdoadic Water Lily. Speaking of which, once the new Ogdoadic cards get released, and I believe it was Age of Overlord, I will make an updated Ogdoadic deck profile as well. And we also play 3 copies of Chaos Witch. Chaos Witch has 2 effects, but you can only use either one of the effects once per turn. So if you use its on-field effect, you can't use its effect when banished, or vice versa. But its effect is you contribute it, special on 2 Dark Beast tokens, which are level 2 Dark Fiends, with 1000 attack and 500 defense. And then if it's banished, it summons 2 Light Beast tokens, which are level 2 Light Tuner Fairies, with 500 attack and 1000 defense. And the tuners do come in handy, or the light tokens do come in handy when you're trying to synchro climb. Then I play 3 copies of Shell of Chaos. Shell of Chaos is the exact same as Core of Chaos, except you have to banish a light monster, and when it's summoned, it can summon a Core of Chaos that is banished. Then I play 3 copies of Chaos Mirage Dragon. Chaos Mirage Dragon has the effect of you can target a banished light or dark monster summoned to your field. Its effects are negated. And then for the rest of the turn, you cannot summon from the X deck unless it is a light or dark synchro. Which that's actually something I forgot to mention about the other Chaos monsters. All of these Chaos monsters include in their effect that you are locked into light and dark synchro monsters for the rest of the turn. And then Chaos Mirage Dragon also has the effect that if it's sent to the graveyard for a synchro material, you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of other monsters used for a synchro summon and banish them. So one thing I like doing with this is if I have this and like usually this can at least banish 1 monster, but actually no, that's right. Well, one thing I like about this is that if you use it in like 2 level 3s, then you get to banish 2 cards on your opponent controls. But of course, with this deck, you're only ever using it with level 4s. So moving on, I play 1 copy of Curse, the Ogdoadic Light, 1 copy of Aliert, the Ogdoadic Dark. Each of these monsters have the effect that if they're in your graveyard, you can contribute 1 monster to special summon them from the graveyard. And then they each have an effect based on which one it is. So, like, Curse has the effect that if you summon it by its own grave effect, then your opponent special summon a monster from their graveyard that's effects negated. Whereas All Year, it lets your opponent return a monster from their graveyard to their hand. And then Curse has the effect when summoned, you can target level 4 lower ogdoadic engrave and special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. And then All Year, it has the effect of when summoned, you can target 2 monsters that are banished, with at least one being a reptile, and return them to the graveyard. Then I also play 1 copy of Omninestia, the Ogdoadic Queen, and 1 copy of Aaron, the Ogdoadic King. Omninestia has the effect, Omninestia. They both include the effect that if they're in the graveyard, you can tribute 2 monsters, special summon them. And then Omninestia has the effect that if your opponent special summons a monster from their graveyard. Let's see. Yeah, if a monster special summon from your opponent's graveyard, except for a damage step, you can send a card you control to the graveyard. Or, I misread that, I'm sorry. Its effect is when a monster special summons from your opponent's graveyard, you can send 1 card they control to the graveyard. So one thing I like about this is that it is non-targeting removal. And then, if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand or deck to the graveyard, except in a damage step, you can special summon 1 light or dark reptile monster that's in your graveyard except for another Omninestia. You can only use each effect once per turn. And then Aaron has the effect that if your opponent adds a card or cards to their hand, except during the draw or phase or damage step, you can send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. If a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can add a light or dark reptile monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And you can only use each effect of Aaron, the Ogdoadic King, once per turn. Next, I'm playing something I think is kind of funny, which is 3 copies of The Creator. The Creator has the effect if you can target 1 monster in your graveyard, discard or send a card from your hand to the graveyard, summon that monster. And you can only use this effect once per turn, and this card cannot. And the other effect it has is it cannot be summoned from the graveyard, which is fine because you're either going to be summoning it from your deck or banish. And next, because I am playing a bunch of light and dark monsters, I figured I'd go ahead and play 3 copies of the Chaos Creator. The Chaos Creator cannot be normal summon or set. It must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing a light and dark monster from your graveyard. And then it has the effect of once per turn, you target 3 banished monsters with different names. Then summon 1 of them, and then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. Every time it says the bottom of the deck. So usually, this is how you mainly recur some of your banished monsters. Then finally, for the big boss monster of the deck, I play 1 copy of Ogdo Abyss, the Ogdoadic Overlord. Ogdo Abyss has the effect that if it's in your graveyard, you can tribute 3 monsters you control, special summon it. And then once while it's face up on the field, you can activate its effect as a quick effect to then be able to send all monsters on the field to the graveyard, except for monsters summoned from the graveyard. And that is it for the monsters. So moving on to the spells, I play 3 copies of Snake Rain. Snake Rain just makes it so you can discard a card to send 4 reptiles from your deck to the grave. Then I play 3 copies of Ogdoadic Water Lily. Water Lily lets you send a reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you have 5 or more different reptiles in your grave, then you can special summon a reptile from your graveyard. So it's a Foolish Burial Monster Reborn. Then I play 3 copies of Shadow's Light. Shadow's Light lets you target a dark monster you control, special summon a light monster from your deck that has the same type and level. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard to then have an additional normal summon of a light or dark monster. And if you use either effect of Shadow's Light, then you cannot then you skip your battle phase that turn. What does it say specifically? Okay, you cannot conduct your battle phase, so you can still activate turn 1. Then I play 3 copies of Chaos Space. Chaos Space lets you send a light or dark monster from your hand to the graveyard to then be able to add a level 4 or 8, a level monster as low as 4 to 8 from your deck to your hand, as long as it includes the attack step. It cannot be normal summoned or set. And then while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it to take one of your banished monsters that cannot be normal, summon, or set and place it at the bottom of your deck. And then you get to draw one card. And then finally, because the Chaos Engines in this deck, I figured I'd go ahead and toss in 3 copies of Scrap Iron Signal. Scrap Iron Signal can only be activated while you control a synchro monster. But if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can activate it to negate that monster's effect. And then afterwards, you can reset it to your field. So I just like this because it's a monster effect that you can use once per turn, but it resets itself. And the only other downside is that you can only activate 1 Scrap Iron Signal per turn. I'm still messing around with this, so worst case scenario, I take 1 out. But that is it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck. For the extra deck, I play 3 copies of Chaos Beast. Chaos Beast has the effect that if any card or cards have been banished this turn, it gains 1,000 attack. You can only use each of its effects once per turn, where you can target one of your banished light or dark monsters to add it back to your hand. And then during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you banish a light and dark monster from your graveyard to summon it back to the field. Then I also play 1 copy of Chaos Goddess. Chaos Goddess has the effect that once per turn, you can target 1 light monster from... You can send a light monster from your hand to the graveyard to then target level 5 or higher dark monster in your graveyard, special on that monster, but it cannot be used as synchro material. So that's it. I just like playing that card as a 1-of because it's very easy to summon off of any of your copies of Chaos Archfiend. Chaos Archfiend has the effect that if any cards have been banished this turn, it gains 2,000 attack. It can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. And then it also banishes any monster that it destroys in battle. And then its other effect is if its card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon a Chaos Synchro monster from your extra deck except for another Chaos Archfiend. Which there actually is a very, very dirty thing you can do with it. That I think it's kind of funny. And then next, I play 1 copy of Thought Ruler Archfiend and 1 copy of Cyframe Lord Omega. Thought Ruler Archfiend's mainly in this deck just because of how if it destroys a monster in battle, you gain life points equal to its original attack points. And then its other effect doesn't really matter that often. Just being that when your opponent activates a spell or trap card that targets a psychic monster on your field, you can pay 1,000 life points to negate the activation if you do destroy it. That's it. And then Cyframe Lord Omega has the effect that once per turn during the main phase, it has the quick effect that you can banish this card, to then banish 1 random card in your opponent's hand, and then they return during your next standby. So if you banish a card from your opponent's hand, and then during your next standby phase, Omega returns and your opponent gets that card back. The other thing is Omega does banish the card face up, so you will know what it is. And then during your opponent's standby phase, so that's how I believe that's the phase. Yeah, during your opponent's standby phase, you can target 1 of your banished cards and return it to the graveyard. Or it can target a banished card and return to the grave. So what I like to do with this is I'll have it return Chaos Space to the graveyard, so you can then banish it to then put something like Core of Chaos, Shell of Chaos, or the Chaos Creator at the bottom of the deck and draw a card. Or you can put any light or dark you need in grave as long as you have 1 banished still. Then I play 1 copy of Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, 1 copy of Red Dragon Archfiend, and 1 copy of Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi has the effect that when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can activate Draco Berserker's effect to then banish that monster. And then if Draco Berserker destroys a monster in battle, you can activate its effect to then banish the destroyed monster. Draco Berserker then gains that monster's attack points and can attack it a second time for that turn, and the attack boost lasts until the end of the turn. And then Red Dragon Archfiend honestly is a placeholder for the last monster I will go over. But for now I figured it's at least a decent monster and being able to clear all your opponent's defense position monsters. Because if it battles a monster in defense position, at the end of the damage step, it destroys all the defense monsters your opponent controls. And then at the end of the turn, if you have any monsters that did not attack, Red Dragon Archfiend destroys them. And then Red Dragon Archfiend has the effect that once per turn, you can activate its effect to destroy all special summoned effect monsters on the field other than itself that have 3,000 or less attack, or that have equal or less attack to itself, which most times will be 3,000. And then your opponent will take 500 points of damage for each monster that was destroyed by its effect. Then for the monsters, I play one copy of Baron de Fleur. Baron is one copy of Baron and one copy Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Chinging. These two are the harder monsters to make in the deck, as most of the time you aren't able to make a level 10 synchro in this deck without using a Chaos effect, and the Chaos monsters, other than the Chaos Creator, lock you into light and dark synchros. But I did leave them in though, just because when you can make them, they are very powerful. And they're also very useful. But Baron is a once per turn, or once while face up negate. Once per turn, target one card of the field and destroy it. And during the standby phase, you can target one monster in your level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard. Return Baron to the extra deck and special summon that monster. And then Sovereign gains 100 attack for every banished card. Your opponent's monsters lose 100 attack and defense for every banished card. If a card is banished, then you can banish one card from your opponent's field and graveyard. And then if Chinging would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish a card from your graveyard instead. And then the final card is what technically Red Dragon Archfiend should be, which is one copy of Chaos Angel. I would prefer to play two, but since I only have one Chaos Angel, I can only play the one. The Chaos Angel has the effect that when you synchro summon it, you can use any light or dark monster as a tuner monster, which means you can even play it in decks that don't use tuners as long as you have light and dark monsters. It also has the effect that if it is special summoned, you can target one card your opponent controls and banish it. And then it has two effects depending on whether or not you use light or dark monsters to make it. If a dark monster was used for its summoning, then dark monsters you control cannot be the monsters you control can't be destroyed in battle. I guess that effect if a dark is used, and if a light is used, makes so that your synchro monsters are unaffected by monster effects activated by your opponent. And that is it for my Ogdoadic Chaos deck profile. For ideas what I can do to improve the deck, and ideas that decks like to see made in the future, or decks like to see face each other, feel free to comment down below. Thanks for watching.